pressure inside the eye and the problems that arise as a result of this pressure going out of balance and whatever. The point is that these inventors, even though they contributed a great deal, but they normally contribute in very, very specialized fields. They don't offer answers to all of the questions that you and I as human beings need. They offer you a solution to a problem, but that problem really isn't everything. And the other problem with the inventors and this category in general is that they don't deal with the most important aspect of humanity, and that's the spiritual aspect. Sure enough, they provide solutions, often very much needed answers to questions that have to do with the human body and alleviating pain and getting rid of disease, and that's very important. Don't get me wrong. But they choose not to speak when it comes to matters of spirituality. Stephen Hawking says it bluntly. He says, we're not going to talk about God, His existence or lack thereof. We're not going to talk about the quote-unquote nature of God. We're not going to talk about the origin of the universe prior to the Big Bang, because that's not my field. That's not what I specialize in. Ask me about the dynamics and the mechanics of the Big Bang. Ask me about the acceleration of the universe. Ask me about, light, and ask me about gravity. But don't ask me about where all of this came from. So there is a huge area in our lives that is left untouched and uncharted by scientists and inventors. The final category of people with the greatest amount of influence are the divinely inspired men and women of God. And what distinguishes this category from all the others, there are a great number of factors that make them unique. One of them is that, first of all, they came with a complete package, with a holistic system. They provide answers to the most pressing questions, be it in the physical world, the metaphysical world, the spiritual world, the emotional world, and everything that a human being would need. Of course, they don't come, prophets and messengers and apostles, they don't come to us and tell us how to deal in the stock market, whether to buy or sell. They don't do that because we as human beings can explore ways of dealing with these questions. We can find out how to reach the sustenance that was predetermined and preordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We spend all our lives striving to come up with, for example, solutions to mathematical problems and to solutions to disease and poverty, and that's very important. But what they focus on is areas that you and I can never reach. We are never able to tell what takes place after death, no matter how hard we try, no matter how many centuries we spend thinking about it, because this has to do with another realm, and that realm is their specialty. While at the same time they offer amazing theories about the physical world, they offer ideas that takes humanity thousands of years to come up with. The commander of the faithful, he has a statement which is truly moving in the area of physical phenomenon. The Imam is walking past a river when he suddenly looks at the water flowing in the river, and he addresses his companions and he says, لو شئت لاستخرجت من هذا الماء نورا. If I wished, I would extract light from this water. Of course, some people then came and said, wow, the commander of the faithful was way ahead of his time. He was talking about water turbines, and he was talking about how we can harness the flow of water and the power of the current in order to generate electricity. And electricity in turn would then be used to power light bulbs. But that's not what the Imam is talking about. The Imam is talking about a very direct process. He's talking about extracting light directly from water, not going through turbines or light bulbs What he's talking about is exactly what we know today as E equals mc squared. The Imam is talking about extracting photons straight out of mass. Extracting energy straight out of matter. That's what the Imam's talking about. He's talking about nuclear fission. He really was way ahead of his time. So the Imams do talk about these things. Imam Rida says that the Prophet knew 70 languages. In fact, if you don't believe this, because it's hard to substantiate, isn't it? I mean, someone lived 1400 years ago, how would you know he speaks 70 languages? There are traditions today in our ancient texts in which the Imams spoke to different people with their own languages. The Prophet, who was born in Mecca and died in Medina, spoke Farsi to Salman al-Farisi, to Salman al-Muhammadi. He spoke Farsi to him. The commander of the faithful did the same thing. He would address Salman and say to him, Ya Salman, ashkam dard? Oh Salman, are you experiencing stomachache? In Persian. So they had, obviously, they were inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, given answers to physical issues and to physical questions, but their main specialty was what we need the most. And what distinguishes the divinely inspired men and women of God from the politicians and the kings and the emperors and the inventors and the scientists and the philosophers and the Gnostics is also their aims and objectives. When Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, he did so to save humanity? No, he didn't. He did so because he was an inventor. This was his job. He invented 300 other things. And one of them, for which we're all very thankful, of course, was the light bulb. He did so because he wanted to add more items to his CV, because he wanted to sell the invention and make money, and because he wanted to serve fellow human beings. We're not disputing that. But compare that to the aims and objectives of the prophets, who were willing to sacrifice everything in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have prophets who were eaten by cannibals. Their people, I mean, it's truly shocking. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to spread His message, wanted to convey His message to every single people around the world. And I can't imagine how that can happen, but God inspires a man in one of the Amazonian tribes, or wherever that was, and that man gets eaten by his own people who were cannibals. There were prophets who starved to death. There were prophets who were killed, resurrected, killed again, resurrected the second time, killed again. In fact, one of them, it's a truly amazing story. He's killed and resurrected, killed and resurrected. And this happens over and over again. Imagine the pain, the excruciating pain that they had to go through every time. Until eventually, the prophet is resurrected for the 20th odd time. He says to the king, you really want to kill me? Just put me out of my misery, for crying out loud. But if you want to kill me, do this. You have to mention the name of God. Say, Bismika Allahum, and that will enable you to kill me. So the king said, of course, the king was killing them for what reason? He was killing them because this man was calling for God, while the king pretended to be God, while he claimed to be the false God, so that people would worship him. So the king said, that's simple enough. Let's get rid of this guy. So he went in front of everybody else, and he said, Bismika Allahum, and killed the prophet. What had just happened? The prophet defeated the king in his death. Suddenly the king realized what he had just done. He mentioned the name of another God. He had sought his help to kill his prophet.